Good morning, everyone. My name is Michael Marcello, and I'm the attorney from the Department of Child Support Services that's going to be walking through this packet review for the income withholding order and national medical support notice. I'm probably going to default back to referring to things as IWO and NMSN, but when you hear those two words, I'm talking about the income withholding order and the national medical support notice. So we're going to take a look at the income withholding order first, and as you'll see, you're greeted with a lot of writing, but the writing is super important because it walks you through the steps that you need to take to make sure that you're in compliance with what the department's asking you to do. This letter that you can see about a mythical person named John Doe for a mechanic shop is asking you to do two things. It's asking you to take a look at the income withholding order and the national medical support documents that you've received and fill them out. So by reading page 1, you're just going to get an overview of what's contained in your packet, but when you get to page 2, it really gives you the nitty-gritty about the forms, and the forms are the things that a lot of employers want to make sure that they're giving the correct copies out to their employees, what they're filling out, and how to fill them out. So if you take a look at the right side of my screen here, and also your screen, you're going to see if you do business in the state of California, the Family Code requires that you give your employee the following forms within 10 days of receipt of this package. So, what's the first bullet point? The income withholding order. You're going to have a copy for your employee and a copy for you to comply with. There's also something called a request for hearing regarding earnings assignment. And at the bottom of that packet, you're going to see the letters FL and the numbers 450. Why are you going to see that? To identify to you that this is a court form that your employee can use if they're concerned about whether or not their earnings should be assigned. That's something that the courts and the Department of Child Support Services can help your employee directly with, but you're just required to give them a copy of that. Then they jump ahead to the next bullet point and move over to the NMSN. You're going to see that Part A is a copy. The copy of Part A is what you're going to give to your employee. Now, when we get to that point a little bit later, you're going to see that Part A is something that the employer fills out, but it has a lot of relevant information about what the employee's medical plan coverage is, what children are going to be covered, things of that nature. You're also going to see that there is a request and notice of hearing regarding health insurance assignment, which is a form that employees are entitled to have if, again, they want to use the court system and the court process to see whether or not their health insurance should be assigned. We also have information sheets and a statement of the obligor, which in this case is your employee's rights and procedures regarding the national medical support notice. This is what the income withholding order actually looks like. You'll see at the top of the screen on the left-hand side, it identifies itself by calling it an income withholding order. So you know that it's asking you to garnish your employee's wages and send in a certain amount of money to the California State Disbursement Unit. In this example, you'll see that your employee is identified. Inside the black box, it has the name of your employee. It has your employer's name, which will be your company, or if you're a self-employed person, your name. A lot of identifying information, the employee's social security number, date of birth, things of that nature. And it also talks about the children, so that way you can confirm that everything that you're seeing is for your employee. On the right-hand side of the screen, you're going to see, again, instructions about how to remit the payments. Remittance information is at the top of the page, and you're going to make sure that you review it and see when your compliance date is. And in this case, it said that you need to comply no later than the first pay period that occurs 10 days after the date, in this case 9/11/2019. So you're going to want to make sure you review that and understand what your requirements are under this section. You're going to give a copy of these documents to your employee. And it's just a very simple 4-page document, one for you, one for your employee, and you're going to want to make sure to remember again that if you have any questions or concerns about how you're doing the withholding, how you're doing the garnishment, you refer to page 3 because it really answers some of these unique questions. Reporting pay date. What if I have multiple income withholding orders? What if for some reason the employee is going to get a huge bonus or a huge severance or something that is not similar to a regular payment, that's under the lump sum payment section. It also reminds you of the fact that you cannot discriminate against your employees, and it also talks about the withholding limits if at any point you get concerned about the 50% rule, things like that. Page 4, which is on the right-hand side of the screen, all you have to do is remember that if your employee leaves your company or gets terminated, just fill this section out and send it back to the Department of Child Support Services, and all our contact information is at the bottom right-hand of this screen. This is an example of what you're going to hand to your employee. It's called the request for hearings regarding earnings assignment. And what this is, again, is just a mechanism that your employee can use to ask a court to see whether or not it's appropriate for a wage assignment to be in place in this case. So that's what it looks like, and you'll give a copy to your employee. This information sheet is very helpful, and it allows your employee to understand exactly what's going on here and how to use that process, so make sure not to forget to include this as well. I know it's moving a little fast, but it's only because it's a very simple process. And what we're doing is we just want to make sure that you understand exactly what is required of you and what copies to give to your employee. Now, the National Medical Support Notice, my personal opinion is that I wish they had started with pages 4 and 5 of this form, but we have to start with page 1 because that's how it's organized. Page 1 is Part A, and Part A is the notice to withhold from healthcare coverage. But I'd like to just skip ahead to page 4 just so that we understand what the instructions are. So if you look at the right-hand side of this screen, and if you're holding a packet in front of you today, you're going to see that page 4 is the instructions to the employer, and I highly encourage everyone to take the time to read the instructions, pages 4 and 5, before jumping to filling out the form, figuring out which copies to give, and things like that. Now, when you look at the instructions, again on the right-hand side of this screen, you're going to understand that there are 2 parts to this document. Part A, which is for the employer, it's called the Notice to Withhold for Healthcare Coverage, which gives the employer the information about the need to withhold the employee contributions required by the group health plans in which a child or children are enrolled. And Part B, which is the medical support notice to the plan administrator, which must be forwarded to the administrator. So what does this mean? Part A is the thing that you, the employer, is going to fill out, and you're also going to give a copy to your employee. And Part B is what you need to forward on to your plan administrator. If you take a look at the middle of this page, it says, keep a copy of Part A, as it may be used to notify the issuing agency, in this case the Department of Child Support Services, if the employee separates from service for any reason, including retirement or termination. What does that mean? After you filled it out, run a copy, give one to the employee and one for you, and put it in the file so that way you have it for the future. Your employer responsibilities are also listed on page 4, so after you read through it, you'll have a better understanding of the time frames. It's a good refresher from the employer forum that we had a couple weeks ago, and it's a great reference point to try and answer some of those questions that may pop up from time to time. If you take a look at page 5, it tells you more time frames, the duration of withholding, the consequences if you don't follow it, and again reminds you about the requirement for notice if there is a termination of employment. So again, highly encourage you to read pages 4 and 5 before going back, which we're going to do now, to page 1 of this form. So what is page 1 and 2? It's the first step in complying with the requirement to fill out Part A. And what you're going to basically do is confirm that all of the employee and employer information is correct, make sure that all of the information is filled out appropriately, and then make sure that you have reviewed, again, that the limits on withholding are reflected at the top of page 2, which is on the right-hand side of the screen. If you look at page 3, this is where a lot of the nuts and bolts of your plan are going to be reviewed and filled out prior to sending it back to the department and giving a copy to your employee. So it says very simply to take a look at these 7 possible scenarios, read through the instructions, and check the appropriate boxes. One thing to highlight here is that after you have determined whether 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 below applies, and you check those boxes and return it to the Department of Child Support Services within 20 business days, no other action is necessary. So what does that mean? Well, it's pretty simple. The employee named in this notice has never been employed by this employer. If that person doesn't work for you and you don't want to keep getting paperwork from the Department of Child Support Services, you just check that box and turn it back into us, and it'll help us move forward with our search to figure out where the person is employed. If there's no health insurance available to you or to the employers, that's box 2. Box 3 talks about the fact that the employee might be among a class of employees that are not eligible for family health coverage under any group health plan maintained by the employer or to which the employer contributes. So health insurance is not available at this time. You check that box. Or box 4 talks about the fact that the department was just a little too late in getting it to you and that employee is actually terminated or no longer employed by you. So you're going to check that box. Box 5 talks about the withholding limits, and if there is a state or federal withholding limit that prevents the withholding of the employee's income for the amount required to obtain coverage, if you remember, that's the analysis about the disposable income available, you check box 5. Please make sure to fill out the entire form, especially the contact for questions at the bottom of this screen. And then Part B, again, that's what you forward on to the administrator. That's the more nuts and bolts related to that, but that's not something that you need to give a copy to your employee. Again, the beginning part of this, pages 1 and 2 of Part B, it's very clear, and it tells you exactly the period of time that's required that you have to fill it out, and for the administrator to take a look at it and see when coverage is effective, who's covered, things of that nature. But for your purposes today, we're focusing more on the Part A and not so much on the Part B. We're going to take a look just briefly at the Statement of Obligor's rights and procedures regarding a National Medical Support Notice or Health Insurance Assignment Order. Reminder, this is a document that you're going to need to give a copy of to your employee. Basically lines out what rights they have, what recourse they can use if they need to go to court, and you're just going to make sure that your employee gets it so that way they know what their rights are too. Now, what else do you need to know? We want to highlight that at the point of employment and termination, we need to know when your employee is no longer with you, and if you know where they went, we need to know that too. The core purpose of the Department of Child Support is that we keep track of everybody and keep our system up to date so that we can help these families. And the more that you can do to help us in keeping everything as current as possible is greatly appreciated. So make sure to return the notification of employment termination. If you have any questions, you can call us at 1-866-901-3212 and we'd be happy to assist you further with that. If the employee leaves your employment or has a lapse in health insurance coverage for the dependents, you would want to complete Termination of Benefits Employment Notice, which you can see an example of on this screen. Again, just a reminder, it's super important when kids have health insurance that everyone knows if that health insurance is going to lapse, because there's nothing worse than going to the doctor and finding out that you don't have health insurance and then you're stuck in a bind with your kids. So please make sure that you comply with returning this form within 10 business days and give us as much information that you have about the termination date and the employee's last known address. We also have included a link to this online if you ever need an electronic version of this form. You're going to want to complete the health insurance information form if the children listed on the NMSN are already enrolled through your employee's health insurance and they have health insurance through your company. So basically that means your employee's already contemplated the fact that he wants to give his kids health insurance and he's already done that. So now we'll know that yes, the children are already covered and you're already in compliance with the NMSN. Again, we've included this nice hyperlink on this presentation if you ever need to access this form in a digital format. Some things that you can do on the employer side is update your contact information by going to the child support website and updating your employer information. This helps us get in contact with you better, so if you have a person of contact, point of contact, updated address, phone number, email address, you're going to want to go ahead and give us that information as well. If you have any questions, the Department of Child Support Services is always available. We are going to be posting a lot of frequently asked questions to our website, and if at any point you need clarification or additional instructions, we will be able to assist you, as well as if you have questions for the State Disbursement Unit, you can contact them as well. We definitely appreciate all of you for your participation today, and we hope to be of service to you in the future. Thank you.